Fellas, today we're going to be looking at Arc Warlocks. Now, this is a build that we wanted to make last season, but after testing Arc Souls, post-Arc 3.0 launch, we, like everyone else, quickly realized that melee and even grenade-based builds had much more to offer. We had Lord of Thunder, the Phantom Fister. These builds were so good, and Lord of Thunder still very good. But this season, guys, you may want to visit Arc Warlocks once again. Arc Souls have received a substantial buff in update 6.3.0, and we posted the initial build we crafted a few weeks ago using Cold Heart. But after exploring Arc Souls a bit longer, we found another build that shifts the focus away from dealing single target damage and purely into insane ad clear. Now, if you've been active at all this season, you'll know that Bungie has been increasing the number of ads present in seasonal activities like Heist Battlegrounds, and this trend is only going to continue with things like the legendary campaign coming in Lightfall. So even if you rock another build this season, you're going to want to have this setup, or at least a setup like this, for purely ad clear. And by the way, Lightfall is less than 2 months away. So for the build, abilities. Today, again, you'll be on Arc Warlock. The super doesn't really matter all that much, although we still do prefer Chaos Reach to focus on high health targets with that quick DPS burst. And honestly, we have so much ad clear already that Storm Chance just feels kind of pointless. For your class ability, we'll be running Healing Rift for survivability, and the melee we've chosen is Chain Lightning, an extended range melee that jolts your targets and chains lightning to nearby targets. While amplified, it creates an additional set of chains. Now, not only is this generally a better melee than Ball Lightning, but it also jolts targets, which is very helpful for our build. Now, for our grenade, we'll be using Storm Grenades. This is the most powerful grenade on the Arc subclass. But there's also another benefit to Storm Grenades that we're going to get into later. Aspects, we've chosen Arc Souls. Cast your Rift to create an Arc Soul that fires at targets in front of you. Allies can pass through your Rift to get an Arc Soul, and your Rift charges faster when allies are near. And while amplified, your Arc Souls are supercharged and gain increased fire rates. We also have Electrostatic Mine. We're defeating targets with Arc abilities, or defeating jolted or blinded targets creates an Ionic Trace, and collecting an Ionic Trace makes you amplify. Now, for our fragments, we have Spark of Discharge, where Arc Weapon Final Blows have a chance to create an Ionic Trace. Spark of Shock, where your Arc Grenade jolts targets. Spark of Ions, where defeating a jolted target creates an Ionic Trace. And Spark of Amplitude, where rapidly defeating targets while you're amplified creates an Orb of Power. Now, for our exotic armor, Fallen Sunstar, guys. Obviously, the go-to choice for so many of our Arc-related builds. Its perk Ionic Conductor states, Ionic Traces you create move faster and grant you additional ability energy, and nearby allies also gain ability energy when you collect an Ionic Trace. Now, this build centers around Ionic Traces for ability regeneration, making Fallen Sunstar the best in-slot option. Now, we've actually tested Crown of Tempest, Getaway Artist, the Stag, Verity's Brow, Sanguine Alchemy, and even Vesper Radius, and nothing was able to match the benefits of Fallen Sunstar. Not even close. Now, for our exotic weapon, guys, we're actually rocking Riskrunner. Now, I honestly don't know why more people have not gravitated to this exotic. I've personally used Riskrunner day one in raids to stay alive. This season, we actually have champion mod support for overloads, and when you combine this with Arc Souls, it is a room clearing machine. Now, before you ask us, Cross, why not Trinity Ghoul? We've played with it, and there's actually fantastic synergy between Trinity Ghoul and Arc Souls, especially if you have the Trinity Ghoul catalyst, as it states that Lightning Rod now triggers from any arc damage final blow. So you can imagine Arc Souls constantly getting kills, proccing Trinity Ghoul, as well as us always having uptime with our abilities. Uptime for Lightning Rod has never been easier. With that being said, though, Riskrunner allows you to just lay on the trigger, and if you're constantly taking arc damage, Arc Conductor and Superconductor is constantly proccing. As Arc Conductor states, when taking arc damage, the weapon becomes more powerful and resists incoming arc damage. And in things like Garden of Salvation, where that Vex Milk is dealing arc damage to you, you can imagine on day one raids how much Riskrunner can keep you alive. Now, with Superconductor, we're actually getting a 10% damage bonus to Riskrunner's damage and a 50% decrease to incoming arc damage. It also chains lightning to nearby adds, and of course, infinite auto reload. Now, for our mods, we've actually built into Elemental Wells, increasing our ability regeneration. Now, we do advise Void Boots, and additionally, 1 Solar and 1 Void armor piece. Now, on our helmet, we have Harmonic Siphon, where rapid weapon final blows with damage matching your subclass type creates an Orb of Power. And Bountiful Wells says that Elemental Well mods that cause you to spawn Elemental Wells can now stack, but the big benefit is the additional well that you spawn, essentially giving you double the ability energy. Now, in our gauntlets, we have Bolstering Detonation, which grants us class ability energy when causing damage with a grenade, and Overload Rounds, which synergizes perfectly here for Riskrunner, as well as Well of Utility. We're picking up a Void Elemental Well, grants you additional class ability energy. Now, on our chest piece, we have Font of Might. We're picking up a Void Elemental Well, grants us additional class ability energy. Again, these do stack. And on our boots, we have Better Already, where your health begins to regenerate immediately after picking up an Orb of power, as well as installation, which reduces class ability cooldown each time you do pick up an aura of power, and Reaping Wellmaker. After activating your class ability, your next weapon final blow on combatants spawns a void elemental well. This is how we're creating the void elemental wells. Now for our class item, we have utility kickstarts. When your class ability energy is fully expended, you gain class ability energy. We also have monochromatic maestro as our artifact mod, where dealing damage with elemental abilities grants increased damage to weapons of the same element for a short duration, and dealing damage with elemental weapons grants increased damage to those abilities of the same element for a short duration. Now granted, if you are in scenarios where you're running solo, then Solar Operative is the preferred mod, as it just gives you a better buff overall. But if you're running with a team, then monochromatic maestro is very good. Now we also have elemental armaments here, where combatant weapon final blows with a damage type that matches your subclass elements have an escalating chance to spawn an elemental well. Again, we'll be spawning two different types of wells, void wells and arc wells. Now how it works, the lifeblood of this build, guys, is Ionic traces, and in order to get arc souls, we need our healing rift to be always accessible. And again, guys, you can literally just stand in your healing rift, and that will keep that arc soul timer refresh. Now Ionic traces grants ability energy, and with Fallen Sunstar, those traces grant us even more energy. Guys, this has become our go-to exotic for arc builds. So first off, Electrostatic Mine. When we defeat an arc debuff target or kill targets with an arc ability, you generate an Ionic trace. These traces will also make us amplified, increasing our arc soul damage. Now this includes grenades, melees, and even our arc souls. And Spark of Discharge actually gives arc weapons a chance at generating Ionic traces, and because of our Chain Lightning melee and Spark of Shock, any target we hit with an ability are also guaranteed to generate an Ionic trace upon death. And that's not all. Spark of Ions, which causes jolted targets to generate an Ionic trace, also stacks with the Electrostatic Mine, causing 2 Ionic traces to release from jolted targets when killed. Now the sum of all these aspects and fragments, when put together, is Ionic traces generated from all of our arc ability and weapon kills. Now this is where Riskrunner comes in. Riskrunner has always been a strong add clear weapon. However, over the years, it's slowly fallen out of the meta with higher damage options that are less restrictive taking precedence. Its perk Arc Conductor is only useful when you take arc damage, and in the past, if no enemies dealt arc damage, then the weapon became essentially useless. You could self-proc the effect by throwing a pulse grenade at your feet, but that just wasted a grenade, and that was very dangerous because you would essentially be starting every engagement off with low health. However, over the past year, there have been several changes that collectively pushed Riskrunner into the meta once more. With the release of Witch Queen, Bungie buffed primary weapons and their subsequent secondary effect damage by 40%, this being our exotic primaries. We're assuming this also includes the lightning generated by Riskrunner, and when reviewing old footage, it seems to actually check out. Either way, the weapon is doing more damage, and it shows. The other change made recently was the rework of Arc 3.0 and Season of the Plunder. This changes the game for self-activation on Riskrunner. Now we can build into ability regeneration, and we aren't specifically required to use pulse grenades. Storm grenades also do self-damage if you stand inside their AoE radius on the initial lightning burst. It's also the best arc grenade, even on other classes. I know a lot of us think of storm grenades only on Titans, but it's the best for PvE, and you get it back extremely quickly with its low cooldown. So you're buffing Riskrunner, you're getting the damage there from the storm grenade, clearing any adds that are close to you, and you're flooding yourself back with Ionic traces with the mods that we've chosen for this build, essentially giving us all of our abilities back immediately. Now looking at our mods, we have 5 elemental well mods. Elemental Armaments to give us our arc wells on Riskrunner kills, Phantom Might buffing our Riskrunner damage by 25%, and we should note that yes, Phantom Might does increase the damage of Chain Lightning. Reaping Wellmaker generates void wells after we use our class ability, so we can leverage Well of Utility to regenerate our class ability for more arc souls. And Bountiful Wells double dips into all of this ability regeneration with the double wells that are dropping. Now to increase our class ability regeneration even further, Harmonic Siphon is what's generating all these orbs with Riskrunner. You've got Installation for class ability and better already for that health regeneration to begin. And our Fragment Spark of Amplitude will increase the number of orbs we can generate from kills while being amplified. With so many orbs, we also get the added benefit of our super regeneration being very, very fast. So you can honestly use your super as often as you like here, guys. Now granted, if you have a weapon with explosive light, you can consistently keep picking up these orbs, but I do advise using your super because you're just going to be getting it back so fast. And on top of that, you have Bolster and Detonation on our gauntlets that will give us class ability energy when using our grenade, and utility kickstart on our class item to instantly replenish a portion of our class ability when we cast it. Now the last mod we do need to look at again is Monochromatic Maestro. This mod is good, but the real bummer is that arc souls do not grant arc weapons more damage. I know, this is a huge bummer, which is why I said Solo Operative may be the go-to choice, but always the go-to choice, guys, in solo content, especially considering the cost. Now, the mod is still worth having since it buffs our abilities and you'll be throwing grenades a lot, and of course it buffs Riskrunner's damage. I do wish it did synergize with Arc Souls. I don't know if this is a bug or if this is just something Bungie overlook, but whatever. We're like halfway through the season, so I don't see it getting fixed anytime soon, but we do have GMs coming up around the corner, so maybe they will. Another odd behavior of monochromatic is if you get the arc weapon damage bonus, then pick up an arc well for Font of Might, the two buffs will stack. But if you get Font of Might first, then monochromatic, they won't stack. So again, weird behavior here. Bungie is addressing things in certain hotfixes, so hopefully they just address this soon. Bungie, monochromatic, not buffing arc soul damage, and the stacking capabilities is weird. Now, for gameplay loop, guys, is really simple. Use your class ability to spawn an arc soul, let it get a kill to become amplified by the Ionic trace, take arc damage from ads, or self-proc with your storm grenade to activate Riskrunner's exotic perk, get kills with Riskrunner, pick up the 2 void wells, proc Reaping Wallmaker for class ability energy, grab arc wells for Font of Might, use your abilities in Riskrunner to buff each other with monochromatic Maestro, and pick up orbs to top off our health and class ability energy once more. Once Arc Souls runs out, you'll easily have another rift back, rinse and repeat. Now, some final notes here. You can swap out Spark of Amplitude for Spark of Resistance if you need more survivability. This is a slight trade-off since we are using orbs for regeneration, but it will make you more tanky when you push into groups of ads. And for champions, if you have the Artifice Bond, you can fit a low entropy superconductor to stun unstoppable champions with your melee, or Advanced Scout to buff your teammates' damage. This is very reliable as long as you don't waste your melee on other ads, and we already have Overload taken care of, so if you need anti-barrier, you can always have a teammate cover that, or run a pulse or a bow. You can even swap to Trinity Ghoul, guys, because we do have anti-barrier bow this season, and this build will work with Trinity Ghoul, although not as spammy. We don't have any hard weapon recommendations for this build, but any weapon with recombination would be fantastic here. Heritage, Succession, you can even use Riptide, which is good for high out targets, and as with previous builds, run whatever resist mods you want on the chest piece. Energy Diffusion Substrate actually just got fixed. It should be stacking, so you can actually rock that, and the Riskrunner Arc Conductor perk does not disappear when you swap weapons. So if you need to quickly use a special or a heavy weapon, you can swap back and still refresh the perk timer. Now, I also want to mention that the new IKELOS SMG, this weapon would also be a great choice for this build because of course it rolls with Bolt Shot and it doesn't require an exotic slot. It synergizes also with Spark of Discharge, and when you reload after a kill, you'll be jolting targets with Volt Shot, tapping into Spark of Ions, Electrostatic Mine, which is crazy good. The only potential issue is you don't have the roll or weapon pattern for Volt Shot IKELOS SMG yet, which we just got, and we're going to be reviewing Volt Shot here soon. But considering that Riskrunner is one of the first exotic quests you get in Destiny 2, and it allows us to tank arc damage like crazy, it's an easy recommendation from us. Now, the biggest problem we ran into this build is the time it takes Riskrunner to reload when its exotic perk is not procced. It's kind of annoying. It's not a major issue, but it was something noticeable, especially if you just like to lay on the trigger. Feel free to swap out Boaster and Detonation for a submachine gun loader though, if you're looking to alleviate that reload time. We actually took this build into Master Nightfalls though, as well as Master Lost Sectors. There's lots of potential here, guys. A lot of tankiness, and as long as you've got the ads to feed you, this build gets deadlier and deadlier. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.